Today on the Bandrew Says podcast, we're going to be discussing Twitter's new policy that might get you banned for posting a picture, and maybe some other stuff perhaps, but not likely. So go ahead and stick around. Let's start with a light piece of Twitter news, and that would be that Jack Dorsey has stepped down as the CEO of Twitter. You heard me right. First, I said this is a light piece of Twitter news, meaning the next piece of Twitter news is going to be much heavier. And secondly, Jack Dorsey has stepped down. He has been replaced by the old CTO. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Parag Agrawal. Agrawal. Is that an L or an I? I can't tell. Agrawal. Let's go with that. That's the whole story. Jack is no longer the CEO of Twitter. He is still the CEO of Square, but I heard that's being renamed Block. Well, I don't know what's happening with Jack Dorsey and his silly beard. I'm one to talk. I don't have a beard. I wish I had a beard like Jack Dorsey. Not like Jack Dorsey. I wish I could grow a beard like Jack Dorsey. I wouldn't keep it because it looks disgusting. Next piece of Twitter news. Twitter may suspend you for posting private pictures. I will be discussing their blog post and the policy, but before I do that, I want to share what might happen to you if you post private photos or photos of a private individual without their authorization, without their consent. This is pulled directly from Twitter's policy on private information. I will go ahead and link their blog post announcing this change and the help article around this policy. They say sharing private information. The first time you violate this policy by sharing private information, such as home address, identity documents, etc., we will require you to remove this content. We will also temporarily lock you out of your account before you can tweet again. If you violate this policy by posting private information again after your first warning, your account will be permanently suspended. Sharing private media. If you violate this policy by sharing private media of an individual without their consent, we will require you to remove the content and temporarily lock your account while you remove the media. If you believe that your account was suspended in error, you can submit an appeal. So based on that, it doesn't sound like Twitter will ban you if you continuously post private media. If you post private information like addresses, then they will ban you after the first warning. You get one warning, second violation, you're banned, or as they put it, permanently suspended. Why don't they call it banning or expulsion? In school, it was suspension. You were suspended for X amount of time and then you're allowed back. A permanent suspension, isn't that inherently contradictory? I don't know. I'm bad with words. So I guess you could violate posting private media as much as you want and you won't be banned. Anyway, let's continue and actually read the blog post announcing this change. As part of our ongoing efforts to build tools with privacy and security at the core, we're updating our existing private information policy and expanding its scope to include private media. Under our existing policy, publishing other people's private information such as phone numbers, addresses, and IDs is already not allowed on Twitter. This includes threatening to expose private information or incentivizing others to do so. There are growing concerns about the misuse of media and information that is not available elsewhere online as a tool to harass, intimidate, and reveal the identities of individuals. Sharing personal media such as images or videos can potentially violate a person's privacy and may lead to emotional or physical harm. The misuse of private media can affect everyone, but can have a disproportionate effect on women, activists, dissidents, and members of minority communities. When we receive a report that a tweet contains unauthorized private media, we will now take action in line with our range of enforcement options. What is in violation of this policy? Under our private information policy, you can't share the following types of private information or media without the permission of the person who it belongs to. Home address or physical location information, including street addresses, GPS coordinates, or other identifying information related to locations that are considered private. Identity documents, including government-issued IDs and Social Security or other national identity numbers. Note, we may make limited exceptions in regions where this information is not considered to be private. contact information including non-public personal phone numbers or email addresses, financial account information including bank account and credit card details, and other private information including biometric data or medical records. New, media of private individuals without the permission of the persons depicted. Sharing private media. When we are notified by individuals depicted or by an authorized representative that they did not consent to having their private image or video shared, we will remove it. This policy is not applicable to media featuring public figures or individuals when media and accompanying tweet text are shared in the public interest or add value to public discourse. However, if the purpose of the dissemination of private images of public figures or individuals who are part of public conversations is to harass, intimidate, or use fear to silence them, we may remove the content in line with our policy against abusive behavior. Similarly, private nude images of public individuals will continue to be actioned under our non-consensual nudity policy. We recognize that there are instances where account holders may share images or videos of private individuals in an effort to help someone involved in a crisis situation, such as in the aftermath of a violent event, or as part of a newsworthy event due to public interest value, and this might outweigh the safety risks to a person. We will always try to assess the context in which the content is shared, and, in such cases, we may allow the images or videos to remain on the service. For instance, we would take into consideration whether the image is publicly available and/or is being covered by mainstream/traditional media, newspapers, TV channels, online news sites, or if a particular image and the accompanying tweet text adds value to the public discourse, is being shared in public interest, or is relevant to the community. And that is all the reading that I wanted to do. I think I captured all of the important aspects from the announcement blog and the policy page. I will link both in the episode notes in case you want to check, in case you want to read a little bit more, or in case you want to dive into all of the links that are in the posts. Now let's discuss this a little bit further. And I know a lot of you are probably expecting me to say, this is a terrible policy, I can't believe they're doing this, they should stop, don't do this, please, you're going to ruin Twitter. In the past, you would be right. But remember, I am now of the mindset where I want the majority of these social media platforms to implement the worst policies they can so they can expedite their own destruction. And because I have that new mindset, I think this is brilliant. I think this is great. But let's pretend for a minute that I am an older version of myself that no longer holds these ideas of accelerationism or this hope that social medias will accelerate their own destruction. If that's the case, I would say this is a terrible move. And the reason I would say that is, what was one of the last good things? What was one of the last saving things, saving graces of Twitter? Independent journalism. Meaning individuals who are not associated with massive media companies or traditional media companies going out on their own. They are much less risk-averse than these massive corporations. They put themselves in harm's way. They go out and they document events, whether it be protests, whether it be riots, whether it be whatever you want. They go out, put themselves in harm's way, capture the events, and post them. They post them for everybody to see. And the reason why I think this is so good is there was nobody dictating what they needed to film. They also don't have this entire bureaucracy that they have to jump through in order to get anything done. But also, there really didn't seem to be a partisan leaning for the independent journalists on Twitter. Now, I'm not denying that there are right-leaning and left-leaning journalists, independent journalists on Twitter. That's undeniable. But as far as the makeup of the journalists on Twitter, it does seem to be pretty even with the split. It doesn't seem as though it's far left-leaning or far right-leaning. Pretty even-handed. And I think that is one of the last good things about Twitter. Or I guess I should say that is one of the last things that I would have thought would have been good about Twitter if we're keeping up this bit. I would have at one point thought that would have been a good thing, but no longer do I think that. I don't think this makes any sense anymore. The last paragraph that I read, though, is what concerns me about this policy. We would take into consideration whether the image is publicly available and/or is being covered by mainstream/traditional media. So in my eyes, I'm interpreting that as Twitter announcing that they will allow mainstream or traditional media the ability to dictate what is acceptable to be posted on Twitter, what is acceptable to be discussed, what is the accepted narrative. Now, to be completely fair, that sentence does go on to say that if a particular image and the accompanying tweet text adds value to the public discourse, is being shared in public interest, or is relevant to the community, they will take that into consideration. And that's all fine and dandy and good and great and grand and whatever other positive words you want to say. But to me, that seems very vague and open to interpretation. So anybody who is working at Twitter on the day that they are making that decision is going to be able to have a lot of power, it seems. And naturally, as I mentioned, I am going to interpret this and analyze the worst case scenario here because that's what I do. And I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to be completely negative, but I do want to shine some light and make you aware of what I think the potential downsides for policy changes might be. This is a situation where we will have to wait and see how it is implemented to see if they do accomplish it well or if they do abuse it. But as far as the sniff test goes, I don't think this passes it because it does seem like a very vague policy that is open to interpretation of the individual on that day, and it could be abused in that nature, or it could be abused by groups who are trying to control the narrative. Now, one thing that would be very interesting to see is if we could have two timelines. I know this isn't possible, but if we could have two timelines starting 2 years ago, one where this policy was implemented and one where it was not implemented. And the reason I'm saying that is I would want to see how the Kyle Rittenhouse story played out. Because the only reason that I think everything played out the way that it did is because there were independent journalists doing the job that the mainstream media was not able to or unwilling to do, going out and documenting these events and publishing them on Twitter. I would want to go back and see whether or not Twitter would say, this is allowed. This is allowed, or this violates our policy about posting media that contains private individuals. That's what I would want to see. But being that we can't do that, we will have to wait and see what happens next time there is a newsworthy event, a noteworthy event that contains a private individual. Will it be abused or will it be fairly implemented? I'm leaning towards it won't be fairly implemented, or I guess I'm going to play it. I will have at one point said I don't think that it will be fairly implemented because now I don't care. Did I do it right? I don't remember. But let's talk about what you can do because I think that's the most important thing that we can discuss. And I am dropping all bits. I am dropping all jokes. Legitimately, I do not think that you should be posting pictures with anybody else unless you have written authorization and approval from them. And I am not joking around about that. Because based on the policy, here's what it says is not a violation of their media policy. For media, the following are not in violation of our policy. The media is publicly available or is being covered by mainstream media. The media and the accompanying tweet text add value to the public discourse or are shared in public interest. Contains eyewitness accounts or on-the-ground reports from developing events. The subject of the media is a public figure. I don't know about you, but none of those sound like group selfie or anything along those lines. So I personally will not ever be posting any image with anyone unless I have written authorization from them. And I'm wondering, I hope that Twitter can provide some boilerplate release form that we can print off hundreds of whenever we go out to an event or do anything and have people sign them whenever we take a picture with them. Now, I know that's a silly idea, and chances are Twitter won't be banning anybody for posting a group selfie online because I'm assuming, this is assuming, and we all know the saying about assuming, it makes an ass out of you and me, but I am assuming that this will only be applied in instances where it's used to harass somebody or threaten somebody. But in the same policy, it says media of private individuals without the permission of the person depicted, person or persons depicted. It doesn't say with the intent to harass or threaten. It just says private individuals without the permission to be depicted. So I would not be posting anything, even if it does seem silly. And maybe we will enter a time where you where you need to actually have release forms signed by people if you want to take a photo with them and post them. Or maybe we'll be entering a beautiful age where people stop taking photos of everything that they do and live in the moment for a little bit. Maybe Twitter's saving the internet. Maybe Twitter is saving people from themselves because people can't help it. Like I said, I will post the blog post announcing this change, the private information policy update, and the Twitter policy for personal information in case you want to read more. And that is all the news that I wanted to discuss. Let's talk about what I've been testing. You have been listening to it. He said the thing. It's the Neumann U67 Reissue. That is right. I am back on my baby. Back on one of my all-time favorites, if not my all-time favorite microphone. I don't know if I'm saying that because I spent so much money on it and now I'm biased because I feel as though I must love it, given how much it cost. But I will be reviewing this finally after a year and a half of having it, about a year and a half of having it and using it. The format isn't going to be any different. I have just had a lot more time with this microphone to become acclimated to it. And if you couldn't gather from what I said, this is one of the best microphones I've ever used, if not the best microphone I've ever used, and you would expect it to be given the price tag. And I posted about it on Twitter. It's a lot of money. It's as much as a used car. It's ridiculous how expensive this thing is. It's great, though. Is it worth it? Probably not. And now you know the conclusion of the review. It's great, but is it worth it? Probably not. I will be putting a review of this out on Tuesday, assuming everything goes well, assuming everything works. And on that note, I am not going to be doing a What You Had to Say or an Ask Bandrew segment because I wanted to keep this episode short to allow for time to troubleshoot. Last week, last Sunday and Monday, editing video was a nightmare. I was getting an insane amount of dropped frames, and I only shoot in 1080p. My computer should be able to handle two streams of 1080p video. It shouldn't be chugging along, dropping frames left and right. And then on Monday, it just stopped generating waveforms. And that's something that's interesting to me. I edit video a lot based on the waveform, and I had never considered that. So not having a waveform is a nightmare. And I don't know how people did it in the olden times. It must have been much more difficult to edit film because you had first off, you had a big chunky actual film editing rig, but also you didn't have these waveforms to edit off of. And that's amazing. But last week I didn't have waveforms and I was dropping frames like crazy. It sucked. I hated every second of it. So what did I do? This is just a story time at this point. I reformatted my entire computer. I just said, okay, back everything up, and then let's reformat it and install only the stuff that I need, because after 4 years of using this thing, I have just accumulated one too many plugin, one too many software installer for a plugin that comes with this one interface that I haven't used in 2 years. So I got rid of all of that stuff, and now, hopefully, everything is going to be working all right. We'll see. If I put out a video on Tuesday, then everything worked, because if I don't, I will have thrown this computer out of a window. That's all I've got for today, because I'm going to start editing and seeing how this is working out. I appreciate you coming by. I would love to hear from you. What do you think about this Twitter change, this new Twitter policy? Do you think this is good? Do you think this is bad? Do you think this is going to be abused? Or do you think that this will be a perfect implementation with no abuse prospects whatsoever? Let me know in the comments on YouTube, because that's the only real way to engage with podcasting. And I hope you have an amazing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Next Sunday, I will talk at you, and hopefully everything works out all right. I love you. You have an amazing week, and I will talk to you then. Bye-bye.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer is Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.